What is going on, Panthers Nation? Let's turn this off. Let's also turn that off. How y'all doing? All right, folks. I'll be home here for a short little bit tonight, not long at all. Just recorded 2 episodes. We have your day 11. I always say day. Practice 11, practice 12 breakdown for the Carolina Panthers coming out. So after I get off of here, go live for a little bit, go back downstairs, cut all that stuff up, and we've got a 50, say we, I, we've got a 53-man roster prediction, which will be available. I was looking at Panthers.com at their website off to the side here. Y'all can't see it, but they were something weird was happening on the edge. Like, what's going on there? Anyways, today, let's have a little bit of fun, folks. Where do I want to start? Where do I want to start? Let's start. I guess we can start with. Let's try this. We'll start with the latest transactions for the Carolina Panthers, as it does involve kickers and or a kicker no longer on the roster. Busy time of year, man. On the back end of the roster, just trying to keep up with who's here, who's not, who's injured. I mean, it becomes a gauntlet. You know, the other thing for folks that go to training camp, I actually feel a little bit bad for like the casual fan, not even casual fan, just I guess casual or fan that's bringing their family because they, when you go in, you get the roster, the what is it, 90 player roster. That thing is printed right before camp starts. And look at how much the roster has changed since then. I mean, it becomes a nightmare trying to keep track of that and understand why they don't just like go back and keep printing them and printing them like whatever roster is available is what they're handing out. And maybe they do, maybe they update it at some point. I don't know. Maybe not. I have no idea. But when we were there, there was 37, which I think was Kimoko Toure. I think that's what he was wearing on the defense side of the ball. I'm actually probably wrong. Anyways, this guy was like 6'4", 6'5", big guy. And wearing 37, Jaden Sheridan is the running back or the player on the info sheet that's wearing number 37. Jaden Sheridan's like my height, probably like 5'8", 5'9". I think he's listed at 5'9". I don't know if that was his official measurement. Quite a drastic difference in size, but unfortunately, I felt bad for the guy. It's not like I could jump in because he's like, "Hey, Mr. 37, Mr. Sheridan." And like the player himself's just like not paying attention because that's not him. He's like, "Did you go to Monmouth? Did you go to Monmouth?" And I'm like, "Oh no, dude, sorry, you got the wrong one, dude." Also, speaking of that, I had to argue with Nolan for like 5 minutes over this. So Nolan was looking at the roster and he was like, "Oh, that's Jaden Sheridan." This was before people were around. Like we were off to the side. I was like, "Dude, that's not Jaden Sheridan." And we just being the 14-year-old that has to be right over everything, he was just back and forth yapping with me. I was like, "Dude, look at him and look at what is listed on the roster and tell me they're the same." And then finally, I think Sheridan came over for kick returns, and I was like, "That is Sheridan." On the other thing was they weren't even wearing like they were. Other guy was wearing a defensive jersey. Sheridan was wearing an offensive jersey. And finally, no one's like, "Oh, okay, you're right." Fun stuff. Speaking of Jaden Sheridan, as we look at the roster, unfortunately, he did get waived. So, I mean, if y'all follow the show, I've talked about every one of these transactions up until this. It's like these last few days, which I think I did the other night. But anyways, looking here recently, this is the shortest little tenure here. Claimed Caden Stearns off of waivers. We waived injured guard JD Dorenzo. Then 2 days later, failed physical for Caden Kearns. He was just picked up by Philadelphia. Tight end Steven Sullivan had a release injury settlement. Then, just to get you caught up on like the last 2 days, quite a few things have happened. Defensive tackle Jaden Peavy was signed. Walter Palmore, defensive tackle, offensive lineman Jack Anderson. We know we finished with 5 offensive linemen the other night. There was a need to bring in more depth at that position in the preseason. You know what I wonder with Cade Mays being hurt, and I know Brady Christensen's technically the backup too, or could play. I don't know if that impacts it. I know Andrew Rame, undrafted free agent center out of Oklahoma, got into the game. Canales even talked about him. But you also have Tavion Robinson, wide receiver, signed back. He was waived, I should say, on the 5th. And then, unfortunately, Jaden Sheridan is gone. I was pulling for him, just undersized guy. Really liked his tape out of Monmouth. Willie Drew was the cornerback that gave up that touchdown pass from Joe Milton. If y'all watched the live stream, I watched that route. I can't even tell you, I can't even remember the guy for the Patriots that ran the route. It was quite a double move, but yeah, you miss plays like that. That's not going to help you. And then waived injured wide receiver Devin Tompkins. That one hurts, man, because I think Tompkins had a good shot. The bottom end of that roster, again, punt return, kick return, wide receiver. Like he could do all 3. And we'll get into the 53-man here in a second. I got to move this along because otherwise I'll be on here all night. But the significant news is Harrison Mevis. And I think it's probably 2 factors here. I think, one, he probably didn't do enough to show the coaching staff that, hey, yeah, let's take a risk on him versus Eddie Pinheiro. And people can talk about money, and you're talking about a few $1,000,000 maybe that you'd be saving with Eddie Pinheiro's contract, or if you let him go, maybe like $1,000,000. You're not saving significant amount of money. But I think that's one factor. I think the second factor, which folks have talked about, is, and even Canales, you've got injuries on the offensive line. You're down to 5. You're going to need a skeleton. I say skeleton crew. You're going to need these second and third string guys in camp in the preseason. So you got to start, balancing out. Hey, do we want to stay here? Do we want to go and bring someone in? So they bring in an offensive tackle. Now, Mevis, one, and I've talked about this quite a bit because folks know that I'm in the Eddie Pinheiro camp. I have been. I think the other factor, maybe you say the third wrinkle in this, is you have a rookie head coach and a rookie general manager. I know Dan Morgan had experience, assistant GM, but first time in the driver's seat for both of these folks. And I can tell you, and I just talked about it, looking at the breakdown from press conference earlier with Eddie Pinheiro, when you talk about putting your money on Harrison, I think it's just too much of a gamble for this staff. Now, I think, saying it differently, I think the staff would much rather not bet on Harrison. And guess what? If Harrison goes out and he's picked up by whoever and he turns into whatever he turns into, I don't know that he will, but you kind of stack these things up. Let's say he turns into this all-pro kicker, saw Harrison Buckner. If that situation happens, sure, I think they'd be glad to just take like the now and present of the known versus the unknown, because here's the unknown and the flip side of going out and signing or choosing Harrison Mevis over Eddie Pinheiro. And it just comes out to just like you get into the season and let's say Harrison Mevis does not pan out, starts missing kicks, you don't really have an option to turn back to. And at that point, you're going to be questioned. Why did you choose to go with an undrafted free agent kicker instead of going with a veteran who's been in the league, who hasn't really given you any reason, like big reason not to go ahead and take him? So I think that's partly where all that landed. You also have the update to the kickoff rules. Eddie Pinheiro talked about it today that there's just a different style of kick. So you don't have to boot it through the end zone every single time. And we could talk all you can talk all about you want about Harrison Mevis and the power. Because yeah, there's no denying the guy's got power and he probably can outkick Eddie by 5, 10 yards. I don't know. Just rough estimate. Power is there. You gotta have accuracy. His field goal percentage in college, which is wider field goal post than what you have in the NFL, was worse than what Eddie's is as a pro. And it almost comes out to the same amount of total kicks when you look at the breakdown. So I don't think, like, for me, I think that's what it boiled down to. I think the other thing, like, people probably don't remember this, but way back when Dave Canales said very early on when he came here, this is a great time to evaluate specialists, gives you the opportunity to find the next guy. And we know Eddie Pinheiro got hurt last year, and we brought on Matthew Wright a few times, one in the preseason, at the end of the year. So I think this is part of it. That's part of the reason that you brought in Harrison. You got to evaluate him. If he doesn't get picked up somewhere else along the way, he's worked with you, he's been in the system, you have familiarity with him, go from there. Now, probably the bigger conversation with this landing where it is what is the Eddie Pinheiro contract going to look like? Because this is where I'm guessing he's going to want to get paid now. And so, sure, y'all know I'm an Eddie man, but at the same time, I want to see how this year plays out. So, like, if you're asking my opinion on, do I think the Panthers now should re-sign him and extend him, and or make him the highest paid kicker, or $3 or $4 million per year kicker? No, I want to see another year, see how this pans out. And I know kicking, in the NFL is truly hit or miss, but I think that's my stance. And I am pulling for Eddie, and I hope he does like show off and show that he's worth the money. But that's kind of where I sit on it. Let's hop over because I've been moving along. All right, folks. So we talked about the kicking competition. Let's stop. I'm actually going to switch over. I was going to try to, where'd we go? I was trying to pull up, there's really not anything to pull up. So I guess we're going to jump right in, have some fun. All right. So I've got a video, like I said, just recorded. Let's share this. I just recorded this, but decided to go ahead and jump on the live stream. I'm going to try to close this by like 9:30. So I have to talk pretty fast. 53-man roster predictions. Some may say you're way too early. I don't know. Is it ever too early right now? Because we are getting close, man. You've got this week. We're in the third week of camp. Second preseason game. Then they'll travel to Buffalo. You're gonna have final roster cuts on like what, the 25th, 26th? We're almost 2 weeks away. 2 weeks. We will be down to 53 and then 16 on the practice squad. I think the bigger question as we look at this roster is how different is the back end going to be as it is today? Or where I should say, I can't predict who's going to get cut and waived and like all that. So I'm just using what we know. But I think even what we know today could look very different in a few weeks from here. And even go back to the 2023 roster cuts and some of the acquisitions that happened. And I know the Panthers weren't in a as prime of a position, but if you go back and look at the cuts that were made and then some of the signings that happened after that, so they ended up claiming 3 guys. I'll share this. So last year, final cuts, you can see all the cuts here. Made a few. Well, that was when Austin went on the pup, but placed him on IR. Terminated some veteran contracts. But so initial roster comes out. You've got 50-ish. So you ended up having 3 guys that we claimed off of waivers. So there would have been no way last year that you would have been able to. I mean, I'm saying like right now at this point, looking out, knowing that these 3 guys are going to land on the roster. And so Deshaun Jameson still around, Claude and is still around. We know about Calvin Throckmorton, not his fault. You go back to last year. I don't want to talk about last year, but Calvin starting, then get cut, going to start elsewhere. I mean, what a freaking wild sequence. But 3 guys right there. I wouldn't be surprised because the Panthers sit at number 1 in the waiver wire. The Panthers pick up 6 or 7. Like you could probably look at your first and second string, 22 and 22, your 3 special teams. So like 6 or 7 guys that ended up getting claimed off of waivers. It's a unique position. Honestly, who I'd be curious last year. I mean, I'm not going to do it now. I'd be curious to go back and look at whoever was one last year. Was it the Texans? No, I'm like, whoever was number 1, Chicago was number 1 in the waiver wire priority if they had picked up a lot. Let's actually, you know what? I'm doing this live. I'm going to see what we got. So they would have had number 1 in the waiver wire at the time. I don't like their roster. Signed. Let's see. I'm looking at theirs. No, I'm not seeing as many, which their UI isn't as great as like the Panthers do a nice job of breaking out so you can clearly see where they're coming from and they're in bold. I'm not actually seeing them claim anyone off of waivers. Released, IR, acquired through. I mean, they got Dan Freeney through a trade. All right. Let's hop back over and actually get into the roster breakdown. Yeah, so I mean, it would be a decision, but if the Panthers like claim someone off of waivers, then yeah, you'll see it. So at that point you have to have the 53. So if they pick them up, sign them off of waivers, then they're going to be on the 53-man roster. So the practice squad, they'll also have designations for the practice squad, but I mean, practice squad is almost like being a free agent because people can pick and sign you over there. Now, I'm sure like once you're actually here and under contract, like things probably could shake up a little bit, but at least initially they'd be on there. So, and I know I kept thinking last year for Claude and Cherilus and Deshaun Jameson, which like we're seeing a little bit more of them this year, but I expected more or a little bit more when we claimed them last year. But let's hop over. What's good, man? Let's see. All right, let's share. Way too early, way too late. 53-man roster. All right, let's make it easy. Number 1, quarterbacks. And as we go through this, a few things to call out. We have 53, so math there is pretty easy. I split it down the middle, 25 on offense, 25 on defense, and then your 3 special teams. Do you know now, barring injury, that special teams is locked with Eddie, JJ, and Johnny Hecker, which we'll talk about at the end. Not really anything to talk about. But quarterbacks, 2 right now, staying on the roster. Bryce Young, Andy Dalton. So I do think, I don't have practice squad listed here, but I think Jake Wooten has a really good chance. I mean, if he wants to hang around, that is, on the practice squad. I do think he's a better option than Jack Plummer. We've heard Canales reference Jack Plummer as a practice squad player, 3rd quarterback type but based off of the performance and what he got on tape last week, hard for me to imagine him hanging around. But yeah, for the purposes of this, I've got us with 2. Now, the other thing I'll probably do for the second pass of this is verify the pup list because as I talk through this, you'll see why. But I'd like to know if there are limitations. You know what? I'm doing it live. There are no limits on the number of players who can be placed on the pup list. There are limitations to going on injured reserve and coming off of the pup list. No limitations published by the NFL. So that let's just triple check. Active. So the active pup list, players are placed on that during training camp. I can share just so y'all don't think I'm making this up because it will help in our analysis and just thinking through. Players are placed on this list, active pup list during camp. Players on this list as a final roster cut downs must be placed on the reserve pup. So they must be on the reserve pup, release, traded, or they'll count towards the 53-man roster. So this is like right now, the injury. I mean, yes, there actually is IR, but some of these guys kind of floating in this zone right now until we get down to the 53-man roster. So here you go. Now this deadline is from 22, but still relevant. Teams must decide by the 53-man cut down whether to place a player on the reserve pup list. Players placed on this list at the time must miss at least the team's first 4 games. So that is an adjustment, which we know about. So miss the first 4 games. Unlike in the past, players can be activated immediately after such time has elapsed. So again, really that first 4 weeks. Any player who's designated on this on or after, so this is when there was multiple cuts. So I guess we can ignore that. Players on the pup list are paid their entire base salary. Player's contract will not be told, meaning the contract will not be suppressed and resumed. While on the pup, unless he is in the last year of his deal and is both not able to perform football services as of the 6th regular season game, not activated ends. Okay, that's not really great. Anyways. All right, so guess that's it. All right, let's hop back over here, folks. Okay, so this is where we can continue the conversation. So Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, Raheem Blackshear. Those 3, in my opinion, locks, and I'm removing any speculation about a Miles Sanders trade until I see it and like it is a thing. I'm not gonna to buy into it right now. So those are your 3. Now I have us keeping 4. You can make a strong case to me that we only keep those 3 and that we decide that Mike Boone is going to go to the practice squad or offered over to the practice squad. I do think with Jonathan Brooks and his recovery, although he is moving right along, I think Canales kind of tipped his hat a little bit earlier this offseason when a few weeks ago said that you're looking at week 3 or week 4 for Jonathan Brooks. I mean, you do the math there and you're like, oh, then just put him on the pup list. And I know it's fluid evaluation right now. It'd be great to have him back, but by what, week 2 or 3? But like if you're already going to float that he's going to be week 2 or well, I should say week 3, I would go ahead at least for the instances of getting the best roster for the first few weeks of the season and having an extra back if needed, put him on the pup list. So that's my initial thought. But again, you could convince me that we only keep 3, the top 3 that are on here now, and then Brooks goes on pup. That puts us at 6. Next up, wide receivers, and I think there's a lot to talk about on this list. There always will be. You talk about a fluid list. That Keying in number 6 was tough. So I have Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Legette. I really think those 4 are locks. Not think, I know those 4 are locks. When I get to the 5, 6, imaginary 7, it feels like to me Amir Smith-Marset has set himself up to lock in number 5. I think he's the replacement for Adam Thielen in the slot long term if he stays around. Punt return versatility. I mean, he is like number 1 punt return. Like that's his position, punt return. Saw what he did last year. You go back, although the passing game wasn't great, he was very involved in the passing game the other night, made a few plays. So I think for him, 5. Now, number 6, I just talked about this, and I have David Moore over Terrace Marshall Jr. over Jalen Coker. I can start with Jalen Coker. I think Jalen Coker's fantastic. I think he's going to be a pretty good player. I just don't know if he's ready. And when you talk about the tail end of this roster, you got to have guys that can play special teams, which I know Coker could be molding himself into that. But I think David Moore, specifically, if we're comparing pros and cons, David Moore can also potentially get involved in return if needed, kickoff. But the one that kind of threw me for a curve, Tompkins getting the boot, unfortunately, with the injury, because he had versatility as wide receiver, punt return, kick return, all 3. So I think Jalen Coker right now is still practice squad. As much as people, you want to elevate him, which is fine. I just don't think there's a reason he's undrafted. I do think he will develop. I just don't think it's right now. Terrace Marshall Jr. That's probably the other question. You're like, where's Terrace? And I could put him on here. I mean, you could probably argue with me that he could be number 6, possibly. But when I think about getting to the end of the roster, again, I think about special teams, but I also think about who knows who, because that's what this business comes down to. David Moore played with Dave Canales. He knows him. He knows the system. And for me, I think when you're weighing the 2 options and you've seen year after year of what Terrace Marshall has done, and he did not have a fantastic game the other night, maybe things are coming together. I put David Moore up there right now. Now, all that said, this is 6 wide receivers. We might not even have to talk about 6. The Panthers could end up carrying only 5. I don't know if that's the case. I mean, this is the conversations you have to have. It's hard. I know that Tampa Bay carried 5, and a lot of people point to that. But you look at Godwin and Mike Evans, 2,000-yard receivers. It's a much different situation than what's here in Carolina right now, in my opinion. So, yeah. Let me hop over here. That's a great question. So I think that is the Coker to practice squad. I think to me would be difficult. You put him on the practice squad, anybody can pick him up. So for me, I could also talk myself into saying that Coker is going to end up making the 53. But for me, right now, I'm towards the edge. But yeah, does make him available, which I think that's also got to be a consideration. So I mean, the coaches, if he is going to hang around and be on the practice squad, have to be selling him on, hey, we think that in a year you're going to be contributing to this team, have the ability to make the roster, versus him just trying to pack up and move somewhere or get scooped up. So last skill position group, this one was a little bit easier. We will talk about a few things on here. Tommy Tremble, when healthy, and I'm going to assume that everyone goes into camp healthy, although I know, Ian Thomas is probably right there at week 1. But Tommy Tremble, Jadavian Sanders, Ian Thomas, Jordan Matthews. Jordan Matthews shown throughout camp and in the preseason game the other night. This really isn't a ranking that I just threw these 4 on here, because I do think Jordan Matthews, you talk about stock up, stock down, his stock is definitely going up. So the other thing, which people may also ask, is Well, Tampa Bay, I think they carried 3 tight ends. And how involved does Dave Canales want the tight ends to be? Does he see value in Jordan Matthews as a pass catcher and what he can offer to Bryce Young over Ian Thomas in blocking in the run game? Does he feel like he can get more out of Jatavian Sanders? I mean, these are all, I always, as I record this, I'm like, I'm glad personally that I am the couch GM right now and I don't actually have to make these decisions. But I think that position group's a little bit easier to sift through there. All right. Leaves us with the offensive line. When I look at the back end of the offensive line, this is where I could probably put some gray really from 7 through 10. Well, 10's separate. Let's talk about it in a second. But Austin Corbett, excuse me, Damian Lewis, Robert Hunt, Ike Ekwonu, Taylor Moton, all locks. I still think Brady Christensen as well. 7 through 9. Cade Mays, Ricky Lee, Badar Traore. When you look at Ricky Lee and Badar Traore, 2 guys that are entering in their second year, and I know Ricky Lee got a call out the other night from Dave Canales. Cade Mays now with the injury, that's a setback. Where this gets weird, a little bit weird, is like how long is Cade Mays going to be out? Is Brady Christensen back to being the backup center now, or are you bringing up Andrew Rame, undrafted free agent center? See now in the mix with this list. So you look at Mays, you look at Lee, Traore, Yash Nijman got a little nugget from Canales today that like he may be a little while out. So I initially put him on the pup list heading into this year. When I look at like I said, when I look through 7, 8, 9, you could convince me that the Panthers are going to pick up, and I know they just brought in some guys as well, but you could convince me that they may go out here and scoop somebody else up that becomes available on the waiver wire. Now, I just went through the pup list. The caveat to the pup list is once the guys become available and if they're ready to be activated, you've got to make a corresponding move. So there's all these guys that talk about like, yeah, we would have this many, when they go on the pup. Once they're back, you got to get to 53 if you're going to activate them. So you could see some changes there. It's a bummer, man. There's a lot riding on Austin Corbett. He's another one. I put him in the bucket with Eddie Pinheiro for me that like I'm not saying the few because I know some people, not some, I think a lot of folks feel confident in Austin, but I was less worried about him as a center heading into this year, like learning the center position. But now, I mean, you can get caught up in some of the camp tweets and bad snaps, low snaps. He's not a true center. Learning the position, I mean, that's quite an adjustment, man. So I could get caught up in that. But I think the other in the mix is like Damian Lewis, which I know he was injured, but then today Canales said it was also some personal stuff going on, which I hope all that aside, like everything's okay back home for him. But we touted this line coming into this year, and I mean injuries can do a lot, but that's kind of the group that I have there, rounding out your offense. Let's move on to the defensive side of the ball, and I did talk way too long, so I'm going to try to speed through this one. On defense, looking at defensive ends, 5, Derek Brown, Ashawn Robinson, TJ Smith, O'Brien Ray. Now, Crumity got hurt. I think a high ankle sprain the other night. And dude, just getting a healthy team into the season, that's all I want. Give us a healthy squad to start the year and go through the whole year. So for me, I do have 5. Junior Aho is the international player. So I know he doesn't impact the 53-man roster, or excuse me, 90-man roster. So we technically have 91 players. I don't know if he'll impact the 53-man roster once we get down to cuts. I need to look into that. But either way, I mean, when you're that far down the list, I think he'd be a practice squad player anyway. So I don't think he'd take away a spot. So I do think at 5 there. But yeah, with Crumity Hurts, and you also get into, I mean, with all these position groups, it's tough because you're like, oh, do we only need 4? But do think 5, and you drafted him. It's hard to imagine that they're just like kicking Crumity to the curb that early in this process. Defensive tackles, easy position group right now with Shy Tuttle and Nick Thurman, having them keeping 2. So that puts us at 7. Oh, yeah. Here's the typo. I've recorded this. These are not your running backs. I think if we had to rely on this group to run the ball, we'd be in some trouble. Inside linebackers, Shaq Thompson, Josie Jewell, Trevin Wallace, and Claudin Cherilus. Those are the 4 right now. When we get on the defense, man, it's tough. So the other thing is, like, I have this split 25-25, like I said. They may decide to keep 5 wide receivers and 3 tight ends, and then add another inside linebacker, a Michael Barrett, because you don't see Michael Barrett on this list, 7th round pick, and or another cornerback or somewhere else outside linebacker, wherever they feel the position of need is. But those are my 4 linebackers, not running backs. Outside outside linebacker, oof. This one hurts too, man. Talk about health. We touted the DJ Williams signing all offseason. He's still not back. I don't know what the timetable is. And Amari Barno, we know, is recovering from the ACL as well. So he's in that group. Have Barno and Wonum pup list going into the season. I mean, these are just like my initial. I hope to be proven wrong, and I hope these guys are available. Right now, your outside linebacker position group, Jadeveon Clowney, DJ Johnson, who has had quite a camp, Iku Leota, and Clavon Chasen. The 4. Now, I am excited about Iku, what he showed the other night. What I don't have on this list, Derek McLendon, who we saw get some pressure the other night. But, it's tough, man. And I think that's another position group. Like, when we get down to waivers, like, if Barno and Wonum are going to be out for quite a while, I do think there's a chance that we look, outside as we bring him down to cuts. Cornerback, J.C. Horn, Dane Jackson, Lamar Jackson right now, and DiCaprio Boodle. Jameson not on the list, but yeah, so 4. Now, we'll tell you, I split cornerbacks and nickel cornerbacks out into 2 groups. So I'll have nickel cornerbacks next. But those are the 4. A lot riding on the health of J.C. Horn, a lot riding on the health of, not health, but the ability of Dane Jackson. And then, yeah, Lamar and DiCaprio, if and when needed, those guys. Nickel, this is where I'm torn. This is why, like, when I look at the offense, I think maybe we could run with 23 players on the offensive side and then push over a few extra guys on defense. Or you just say, you know what, Ejiro, you're a fantastic, you do a fantastic job. Here's what you got and roll with it. Now, we'll say, like, if you go back and listen to Canales talk about his time in Tampa, that's pretty much what Todd Bowles told him last year. Like, they didn't go out and get the splash free agents. I mean, they got Baker Mayfield. That wasn't splash at the time. But he basically knew that whatever they had in that room, they had to work with. I listened to a fantastic podcast the other day with Rick Stroud. I want to say, I need to get his name right. Covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but he did a podcast with the GM of Tampa Bay and him talking through it. But they did talk about building the team last year. They did talk about everyone kind of writing them off, that whole process. I listened to it hoping that we get a nugget with Dave Canales. I mean, Dave Canales was mentioned, but just that they moved on. that they feel like the offense is going to be in a better spot this year with new personnel and all that. It wasn't a knock on Canales, but I was hoping we go through this thing and like the GM would say, "Yeah, and Dave Canales revolutionized the offense, and he's part of the reason there was so much success." It didn't happen. All right, back on track here. I could still make a case that you do that. What was I saying? I'm getting twisted. Todd Bowles, anyways, had told Dave, like, this is what you got. This is what you got to work with. So that's why I was trying to tie this back to it, Jero. All right, Troy Hill, Shaw Smith Wade, rounding out the nickelback position. Now we know Shaw Smith is a cornerback. Troy Hill, older 1-year contract, veteran though, plays the system really well. So I think those are my two. Now the other one, this is not on the list because we're down to 25, is Jamie Robinson. Jamie Robinson not listed here. So Xavier Woods, Jordan Fuller, Alex Cook, excuse me. Man, Alex Cook was making some plays the other day and as a safety and on special teams. Hopefully he can be that Sam Franklin replacement, and then Nick Scott. So Jamie Robinson, not listed. However, Jamie Robinson also made some plays the other night. It's tough. Like as you shuffle this thing around, trying to make a decision on like who's where, who's what, good stuff. And I will say, you know what, as I put this together, I have no idea how I missed this because I feel like an idiot now. I did not put Chandler Zavala on this list. Freaking idiot. So that does change it. Because like when I looked at this, man, I just kept looking at it like, what is wrong with this list? Why do I have Cade Mays or Ricky Lee in this group as like the 8th and 9th offensive lineman? I would put Chandler Zavala probably at 7 right now, which is a little bit different than where I thought he was coming into this year. So, anyways, I just thought of that to talk about players that are missing. So, yeah, let's see. Sorry, y'all, I'm catching up. Yeah, what's up, man? I haven't been live for long. I said I was going to be on here for 30 minutes, and I'm still going. Oh, man. Yeah, a lot of people think that if Coker goes to practice squad, he'll get picked up. I just don't, because if you here's the thing, if he's picked up, you got to sign him to your 53-man roster. So remember that. Like a lot of people are going to say like he'll easily get picked up. You got to sign him to the active roster, which initially may not be, bad thing as far as like availability or teams needing a wide receiver. But if you pick someone up, they got to be on your active roster. So I do think that's partially an advantage. The other thing, folks, like I know in Carolina we're laser focused, and it's funny to see how attached we get to undrafted free agents. What I like to remind people is they are an undrafted free agent for a reason. They made it through all 7 rounds of the NFL draft. All 32 teams passed on them. And I know you can't draft all your guys, but I like to reemphasize that. As much as we want to hype him up, which I think you should, you also got to remember that, like, there's a reason he's undrafted, didn't make the cut, and didn't get picked up. Now, I'm rooting for the success stories. I mean, I had guys last year that I was like, oh, I'd love this guy to pan out, this guy to pan out. We have seen it happen. I mean, Ike Leoto was undrafted last year, got playing time, worked his way up. We see who he is now. I think that would be a really good story for Jalen Coker. And in the unfortunate case that you end up having potential injuries, which we never want to see. I don't. Yeah, I mean, right now he's possibly going to the practice squad. I could still make a strong case to actually take him over Shaw Smith Wade if I was putting it out there. But yeah, he did have the ties to Carolina and wanted to come here for his dad. So I think in his back pocket, I was talking about it a little bit earlier with Coker that could be part of the reason that he wants to hang around if the staff can convince him that he can develop. If he stays around here and like, hey, this is the path that we can get you to being able to play next year or whatever it is. But let's hop over, close it out. Special teams, Eddie Pinheiro, JJ Jensen, Johnny Hecker. That one's pretty easy. And this is not a in stone practice squad, but this is like an initial pass at a practice squad based off of what we know. So I have Michael Barrett, Jalen Coker, Jake Luton, Nash Jensen. He's another one that I didn't throw up in the initial list, but kind of moved him down. Andrew Rain, so that we still have a true center. Mike Strachan, possibly, but maybe not. Tay Davis. Tay Davis is really good on special teams as well. Jamie Robinson, Derek McLendon. I could even see a situation where we only keep like 7, 8, 9 out of the practice squad or on the 90-man roster. Then again, part of the reason you bring all these guys in and the undrafted guys, and at least the guys that are still here through week 2, week 3, week 4, and will be here till the end, they're already going to have familiarity with the system. They're already going to know the coaches. They're already going to know the schemes. So it's hard to imagine that we would venture out. I do think we'll sign a few other guys to the practice squad that maybe aren't here today, but it's hard to imagine, picking up 8 or 9 elsewhere because you've got the guys that have been here and already know the ins and outs of everything. So good stuff, man. Half the league is undrafted. Not half the league. A good portion, though. A good portion of the league. So undrafted free agents in the NFL. If you're talking about active, the active roster, I can't remember what the actual number is. And yeah, so you're actually pretty close there. Let's see. This is old. This is not what I wanted to look at. There are nearly 500 undrafted players in the NFL. I don't know what the date is of this article, though, but who got that right, man? There's a good portion. So I do agree with you, though. Like, I think eventually, I think there's a good spot for Coker here. I still think he's got a chance. I was trying to find, because I think I see the article that you're talking about. So it says on a yearly basis. So as of May, this is freaking, man, Google summary. Between 15 and 20 undrafted free agents make an NFL roster each year. In 2023, only one undrafted free agent, Green Bay wide receiver Malik Heath, started in week 1. So I think there is, though, still a big difference in getting the cut. 15 members of the Pro Football Hall of Fame who were undrafted. It's a good stat, too. All for it, man. Oh, you're good. You're good, man. It's true. Cool, y'all. Well, I gotta go cut all these videos. So that's gonna do it for me tonight. I will see y'all later. Y'all have a good one.